Hi, I'm Megan Walker, and I want to carry on and talk more about personal brand and kind of how you can get started with that and really sort of build up and market yourself. So we've talked about what is personal brand, and we've had some feedback from some MVPs and their thoughts on the subject. And in this video, I want to talk about your website, so getting something set up. So I think the first thing to think about is, why would you want a website? What do you actually want to put on there? For me, if you're not going to be producing content and it's literally just going to be a page about yourself, I would say don't bother. I would say go ahead and put stuff on LinkedIn. I think having a website to me is because you want to put content out there. You actually want to share information with people. So that's the first thing, is think about what sort of things do you actually want to put on your website. Once you've thought about that, then to me, having some kind of goals for your content is a good idea. So if you just get started and you've got your site and you don't really have any clear path of which to go down, then sometimes you might have a couple of blog posts in a week, and then you might go several months and not produce anything, maybe even longer. So have some clear goals in mind. Do you want to be producing content and post a blog every week, every 2 weeks, every month, every 6 months? That's fine, as long as you have those goals set so that you know whether you're actually achieving those goals, and you're not kind of constantly thinking, oh, I haven't had anything published for a while, I haven't put any content up for a while, and you're kind of getting stressed about that. But if your goals are set, then you've got something that you're actually aiming for, rather than just kind of as and when. And sometimes it's not always that easy. And sometimes you have to step back and reevaluate the goals, and maybe even shift or change those goals depending on what's going on in your life at that moment in time. So once you've come up with those goals and you've got a direction you're going down, the next thing is to think about the domain. What is it that you want to have as the website address, so that URL? So for me, it's meganvwalker.com. Now, the reason that I chose that is I wanted meganwalker.com, but there's actually a basketball player in the USA who is called Megan Walker, and I believe she has that domain of that set up. So it was already gone. I couldn't use that. I didn't want to come up with something that I thought at the time might be cool or clever, and I didn't want anything like Emoji Megs or anything like that, because not everybody knows that nickname that I was given back in 2018. It's not necessarily relevant to a lot of people out there. And also, if you use something that ties to you at this moment in time, is that going to change, or is that going to kind of peg you into a hole that we talked about in the last video, where the same thing with if you're coming up with a Twitter handle or something like that, are you sort of putting yourself into a box when really you don't need to? So if you've got a unique name, that's awesome. Likely that domain will be available. If not, you might have to throw in your middle initial like I have, but come up with something that is easy to tell people. So when you're at an event and you're doing a presentation, and at the end you're kind of saying, hey, you can find me online at this place, you don't want something that is an extremely long URL. I had a business when I lived in the USA, and I did social media and websites and that kind of thing. And I called it Purple Star Consulting, which was fine, but it was a very long URL. And then when I added in a prefix for an email address, it was really long for people to actually type out. So try and keep something short if you can. The shorter the better. And if it's catchy, great. But again, don't try and be too clever with that. So once you've got your domain figured out and you've looked and made sure that it's not used already, and you don't have somebody that's maybe got the .com version or the .co.uk or whatever that is for the location that you're in, try and get .com, because that by far is still what people search for. It's still what people assume your site is going to be. So try and get .com if you can. So once you know that the domain is available, you need to actually not only purchase the domain, but you need to get hosting from somewhere as well. So the hosting is basically where all of your pages are stored and where it's being sort of served up to when somebody Googles, where is that being pulled from? So that's basically where you're getting your hosting. I used GoDaddy for a long time. We use GoDaddy for the Up podcast that I do with Lisa Crosby. But I found that for my own website, it was getting slower and slower. And that's just because I was getting more and more traffic, which is an awesome problem to have. But then I realized, okay, I needed something else. And for that, I actually went with WP Engine, which is a little bit of a higher cost, but I wanted something that I knew would be stable, there wouldn't be downtime, it wouldn't be slow because of loading issues or bandwidth or throttling or anything like that. So that's what I use for my site. I've also got the mvpadventcalendar.com site. That is actually on Bluehost. So I use a variety of different ones, and as long as you understand and know what you're getting in terms of bandwidth, in terms of any throttling, in terms of upload speed, download speed, depending on what you've got on your site, then go for something cheap and cheerful to start with, because it could be a while before you actually start getting much traffic. So I would say rather than spending too much to begin with, just get it up and running. That's fine. You can always move things around and switch hosting companies later on. But there's always really good deals going on, and you could get something very, very cheap for a year and get up and running pretty quickly. So there's 3 things that I would say add to your website to start with. And these are things that you might not think immediately that you would need or want, but I would say if you start as you mean to go on, then that's a good approach. So the first thing I would say is have a place where people know where to find you online. So have links or icons for your social media profiles. That's one of the first things that I do. If I find an article that somebody's written and I'm reading it on their website, one of the first things that I do is I look to see if they're on Twitter. More often than not, Twitter is the one that I'm looking for, so that I can go ahead and follow them. So that is really important. And I've been on people's websites that I know are on Twitter or on LinkedIn or other social media platforms, and they haven't got it anywhere. They don't have a link for people to be able to find them and subscribe or connect with them. So that's number 1, I would say, is probably the most important. Second is an about you page. So about who you are, what you do, what it is that people can expect from your website. Doesn't have to be very long, doesn't have to be War and Peace. It's just something about you and who you are. That's another thing that I will always go and look for. Again, if I find a piece of content and I find something that I think is really good and I'm interested in finding that person online and reading more about them, that's what I will look for. I want to know who they are. I want to have a bit of personality from them, that kind of thing. So consider adding one of those. And the third thing, and I think a lot of people miss this out, and for me, this is something that I wanted immediately once I started blogging, and that is a way for people to subscribe. Whether you think it or not, there are still a lot of people that subscribe to newsletters or RSS feeds. I have people that I know have actually taken the RSS feed directly and subscribed to that rather than getting the email communication that I send out. And that's totally fine. So have a way in which people know how they can actually subscribe to your content. And again, it starts off and you might think, oh, no one's going to subscribe, and they might not for a while. But I always try and subscribe to people's content if I think it's good content. So give people a way to do that on your website as well. So those are some tips and some pointers to kind of get started. I would also not necessarily worry too much about what the site looks like in terms of the theme initially. Find something that you like. Find something that's probably fairly clean and crisp and clear. So not too over the top, vibrant, not too much going on. Find something clear so that when people are on the site, they're focused on the content rather than what's going on around them on the pages themselves. Once you get into it and you're actually producing content, chances are you'll get to a point where you want to actually revamp and change what the site looks like. But that's great because then you can focus on that rather than what it is that you want to produce. So don't spend way too much time on what the pages themselves will look like when really the content is what's important. And you can always come back to the look, the feel, the theme, the fonts, the colors, that kind of thing. You can do that later on. So Just something else to keep in mind. Don't let that hold you back from actually producing the content. And also don't think you need to have content ready with like 3 or 4 or 5 blogs to get started. Just push the first one out there, share it, and then just keep producing that content. All right, so now let's hear from some other MVPs with their thoughts on websites.
I use WordPress to host it. And that's because it's just simply a platform that I've been using for a while now, and it's something I'm comfortable making changes to and updating and all that sort of stuff. It is the website for my company as well, and really the way that I started using it was when I started to build out a blog. It was already on WordPress. It made it easy to add on a blog, made it easy to brand it, all that sort of stuff. So it's just a platform that I know and I'm comfortable with. And I have it hosted with a company called Ionos by One, which is essentially a large kind of domain registrar website hosting company, very similar to GoDaddy.
I have a blog, and I don't use any platforms specifically other than this really old blogengine.net, which was like an ASP.NET framework, which is, I think, still going. It's open source, and I use it just simply because I love to code and I love to build things to see the challenges that are involved. I kind of wish I was on WordPress these days because there's so many great plugins and great themes and stuff. So, maybe I'll be just migrating over to WordPress at some point.
When I first started out writing blogs, I wasn't sure if I wanted to do it regularly. I didn't know where I was going. Life before being an MVP and kind of finding my feet, I just did LinkedIn articles. So it's great. They're all in one space. They're pretty safe. Pretty unlikely anyone's going to turn off LinkedIn anytime soon. And it was easy to share out on LinkedIn, which is where I mainly do my networking. And it was just one place where I could post everything without the commitment.
I do have a website. Flyingpolymath.com is hosted and built with Wix. I decided a long time ago that done is better than perfect, and they had plenty of templates and easy tools that let me focus on the content rather than design.
Using a WordPress template, but I actually designed the template myself. I'm a big web developer and I wanted it to be really simple, really clean. I didn't want a lot of information all flying around. And that's what my brand is kind of aimed at. It's aimed at being really clean and easy to understand in a complex world.
My website and blog is a WordPress site hosted on WP Engine. I started out like 8 or 9 years ago and started with Blogger. It worked fine for then, but then a couple of years back I wanted to try something else. So I migrated everything to a WordPress site that was then hosted by a small Swedish provider. And as my own requirements got bigger for this site, I outgrew that small Swedish provider and quite recently moved to WP Engine.
I don't really have like a GusGonzalez.com website or something like that where you can go and learn more about me and that and whatnot. There is also a blog website, but I've been focusing my time over the last 3 years to creating audio and visual content rather than writing it. I've actually encouraged people to take my podcast and my videos and write if that's what they enjoy doing, because I know that some people don't like to create video and audio. They don't want to be in front of the camera like me. I don't mind. It's not that I like it. I just don't mind.
Powerplatform.se. It's run on WordPress. I think I like that a lot. I used to have my blog on Blogspot, and that worked very, very well as well. It's a bit, it's more powerful to have it on WordPress. There's more features and stuff like that. So I do like WordPress better.
I started out with WordPress, WordPress.org. It's on WordPress.com, is the commercial hosting part. I think it was free or a few dollars a year, very inexpensive. And I had a few plugins for it and I had a theme, but just maintaining a WordPress site for me just wasn't my thing. Doing lots of design wasn't my thing. So I switched to Squarespace. Been a happy Squarespace user for a couple of years. Some good templates on there. I chose one, branded it really nice and simply. I use a design concept called an upside down home page. And if you visit customary.com, you'll see what I mean.
Use WordPress. I just use WordPress.com for my blog. It's very easy, very simple. It's pretty cheap over the, it's a just a few dollars every year, which is weird because people say, well, if you're a portals person, why aren't you using Power Apps Portals? Because it's expensive and it has a different purpose than doing blogs. So that's why I use WordPress for my blog. I do actually have a Power Apps portal for my business website, but no one goes there. No one needs to. People know how to find me. I'm not really advertising so much.
So I hope these tips help. I hope that it gives you a good starting point. If you've got any questions, go ahead and put them in below the video. Happy to answer anything, or you can always go to my website, meganvwalker.com, and you can send me a message through the site as well. Happy to have any discussions or offer any suggestions or advice.